I'm again looking forward to today's chat with Aline McCarthy. I met Aline a couple of years ago now when we were doing a business coaching program with Tori Archbold, and Elaine's got a really interesting story to share and a really important message too. I want to find out about the change in career, but Elaine is a functional nutrition practitioner, and she came to that part of the journey was through her own health challenges, and where conventional medicine didn't help her. She then came on her own journey to kind of heal yourself, and through that, you've now being able to help other people on their wellness journey. So, welcome to the Happiness Hive podcast, Aline. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to spend some time with you and connect with you all.
Yes. So just before we dive into a lot about your wellness journey and what you're doing now, if you can just help the listeners just to know what stage of life you're at. So where you're at in life.
So I am 43 and I've got two kids. They are almost 13, so I was starting to get into teenagehood, and my daughter is 10. I've got a little puppy dog and a husband, obviously, and I live near the beach in Bronte in Sydney, and obviously also running my own business. So yeah, it's busy times, as most mums will relate to.
Do you know what? And a lot of the women I have on the podcast, not all of them, but a lot of them are working, either running their own businesses or working for someone else, and have families that they're managing, and life is busy. I think that seems to be the thread of a lot of the women that I chat with. Tell me, excuse me, so you're living in Sydney, you're by the beach. I'm super, super jealous whenever I see you on social media and you're showing just where you're living. Have you always lived there?
No, I was born in Germany and grew up there. I only came to Australia when I was 27. So definitely still appreciate the ocean and absolutely adore it. It's my daily dose of happiness. And whenever I feel in a bit of a funk, I just need to walk down to the beach and I immediately feel better. So I feel a deep gratitude to be able to live this sunshine and ocean life here in Sydney.
That sounds absolutely beautiful. That sounds really beautiful. The ocean, I don't live at the ocean, but it's definitely my happy place. That's my goal, to be living that dream by the ocean. So whereabouts in Germany did you grow up?
It's very close to the French border, hence why my first name is also a French name. And it's about, for most people, it's about an hour and a half from Frankfurt Airport, along the Rhine, the big river. And then when you cross the river with a little boat or over the bridge, you are basically in France. The Black Forest is also nearby, and it's a small town. So I'm a small town girl.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful region to go back to.
And do you go back often? Do you go back there often?
I try to go every second year. Obviously, COVID has stopped from going for a while, but I did go last year, and I'm definitely going to go again next year. So yes, I love Europe in general, just Europe.
Yeah. And is your family still there?
Yes, my whole family is still there.
So what was family for you? Are you siblings? Do you have siblings?
Yeah, an older brother, and we grew up in the same house with my grandparents. So my grandparents lived downstairs and we lived upstairs, and definitely my grandparents had a big garden. They loved growing their own food. They were obviously that war generation. They were children in the war and grew up with a lot of famine and not enough food around. So their happiness was always having a massive garden with lots of tomato plants and lettuces and rhubarb and fruit trees, and conserving everything for winter, and buying as little as possible from the shop. And that was actually a really beautiful way to grow up. And I would always come home and from school and and smell my grandmother's beautiful cooking and baking that she would do every day. And I could always sneak in and check out if that food was maybe better than my mum's food. And it would usually be like grandma go in and have some of her food as well, or take it upstairs, or just spend some time with them. So yeah, and on all the other aunties, uncles, cousins all lived really close by as well. So it all felt very connected.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. And it almost sounds like a different world away, but almost a world that we're getting back to in trying to be able to be less reliant on products like from, shops and packaging, and getting back to that wholesome living. That sounds like a beautiful.
Definitely. It definitely showed me, that love for our for soil, the quality of soil, the quality of produce. Just remembering how tomatoes tasted, how everything tasted so fresh from the garden, and also the pride that you take in having grown that, the health that obviously comes along with that, and also, the hard work, but also the joy that comes when you work hard. You get to bear, you get to reap.
Yeah, it's the reward, isn't it? You reap the reward. It reminds me, my grandmother grew up in the Depression, and she lived in regional New South Wales and had a block of land where they grew their own produce as well. They had a huge veggie garden, and she, everything was home cooked, and she was just the queen of recycling. Back, when we were growing up, when it wasn't cool to recycle, she was the queen of recycling, because that's what she grew up. They didn't have anything, so they needed to recycle. And and just those really beautiful, wholesome memories. That's lovely. So what was growing up like? So it was sort of that family, the community, the communal living, the simplicity. Mum and dad, did you have mum and dad?
Yes.
Living there? Yeah. Were they working? Were they working parents?
Yeah, both working parents. My mother was obviously more part-time when we were little, and then later she definitely worked full-time. So it was definitely also very convenient to have that grandmother still in the house.
Yeah.
He was a tailor, actually, so she always made people clothes from home. So even when she worked, she was obviously around, and it gave us that grounding that somebody was always there, with an open ear anyway, even if the parents were out. But it also taught me from an early age that, German women are raised to be very independent, financially also. There is a lot more equality, or has a lot more equality in the payment system, but also in, maternal leave. Childcare is obviously extremely affordable in Germany, which really it isn't here in Australia.
No, it's not, is it? No.
Schooling is free, university is free. So it's, raises you as a woman to also be self-reliant and independent, but also to be able to go back to work without having huge amount of childcare fees and preventative things kind of attached to that. Because at one point here, when my kids were little, I paid so much in childcare that my whole earnings kind of went into childcare. And then you are juggling, crying little children. They constantly get sick. You also never feel like you're actually performing really well at work, and you feel so frustrated because nothing is really the way you wanted it to be, but your entire wage goes towards that childcare that your children kind of cry about and get sick all the time.
Actually, it's really interesting, isn't it? I remember my kids were in childcare, and they were in, and this is going back, they're 25 and 27 now. So this is going back a lot of years, but they were in for 3 days a week. And when they, and there was a preschool system as part of the childcare, so they didn't go to the government preschool. when they left childcare, the kids went to a private school, an Anglican school. We were paying less for the private school than we were for 3 days childcare for the kids.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, isn't it, for parents? And just thinking about the impact that it has on, families. A lot of the time it's the women, but the impact on the families about that added pressure. So why can't we be more like Germany? Why can't we? Like a lot of the European countries seem to have it sorted, or sorted better than us, don't they?
Yeah, and I also get the dads to have really long
Yes. Yeah.
leave as well. So again, it can be a lot more of a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
And most of my male friends back in Germany, they really loved to get that extra time, a couple of
Yeah.
with the children, and they could take a month when the baby was born, and then they would usually take a whole month later when the baby was a little bit older, so they could actually go on a family holiday for a month together, and it gave them so much more connection to the baby. And just feeling like they're part of the thing and not just the money earners, because it's not really fair on the dads as well to
Yeah.
for have the time with the kids. So it's not okay for both sides, for the woman who has to, sacrifice her career, and also, the sacrifices down the line when we start aging and we don't have the same
Yes.
supervision.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a huge topic, where, I feel like in Australia, you have to be actually quite fearful of getting old as a woman and maybe not having enough retirement funding for yourself, because it is a huge issue.
Yeah, and it really is. So for all the politicians, I don't know if there are politicians listening, but listen and help out. You went to uni in Germany? Did you go to
Yeah,
uni?
I studied engineering for media. So I then specialized in film and television and worked in that industry for a few years, but very unhappily so, which is why I then made the career switch to health eventually.
So how did you get into the engineering, the film media engineering? What was the process to get there if it wasn't a happy, was that something you discovered that you didn't love it, or?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, even as a small child, I would always walk around and say, I'm going to be a doctor, but I'm not going to be a normal doctor. Remember that of feeling so certain about it. And people would always go, what do you mean, not a normal doctor? And I couldn't really explain it, but I would just say, I'm not going to be like what the other doctors are doing. And I would always, even in primary school, I always signed up for whole food cooking classes when the other girls would go to horse riding.
Wow.
I whole food cooking classes and organic skincare, make your own organic skincare classes. So I was already really into, not using toxic products and healthy eating from a very early age on, like age 7 or 8 in school. So it's quite funny looking back on that, because most of the other girls were playing tennis or doing something else.
Wow, do you know what is interesting now? I'm listening to that going, that's interesting that you knew that you wanted to be a doctor, but not a normal doctor, and you had those interests. And I'm a number of years ahead of you, whole food cooking or organic skincare wasn't even on the radar when I went to school. I'm not sure whether I would have taken that, but maybe, but it wasn't even on the radar. So that's really interesting that there was that option for you, but it sounded like you were pretty determined. So how did you end up getting into engineering?
So and I was always very good at school. I graduated as one of the tops in the class. And so I had many options available to me. But by that time, you're sort of a teenager and you want to do what's cool. I wanted to do something really fun and cool. And at the time, it was all about media and communication studies. And I was also really good at languages. So I did apply for a couple of communication studies that required 2 languages, but didn't get in. But I did get into the audiovisual media, and at the time that was just really taking off. Funnily enough, there wasn't even any social media or anything.
Yeah, no, I yes.
But it just seemed like such an exciting, upcoming thing, working in television and film and producing things. And I never struggled with being creative. So I guess I always imagined it to be a really creative work that would always be interesting and fun. And that's what I applied for and got into. And I had a lot of fun studying it. The engineering part was the hard bit, but I got that ticked off, and then you can move on to more creative things. But then the workplace is not really the same thing than when you study, as you then start to realize there's a lot of deadlines, a lot of pressure, a lot of working in dark rooms, which is not really that great. Really, working long hours and then eating unhealthy food, late night pizzas that get delivered to the workplace, and but also there was a lot of bullying and just really bad company culture, because there is so much pressure in the industry. And I guess I was just really too sensitive. I really feel people's emotions. I'm really attuned to, what's going on in the room and what other people are feeling as well. So I couldn't cope with the pressure really well, and it really started to affect my health, having these deadlines. And I guess for many years also not really making a lot of money. There's also, once you graduate, a lot of, they're an apprentice. They don't pay you as an apprentice. You're so lucky to be there at the film. Just so lucky to be there that you don't get paid, and it kind of grinds you down, that you end up doing jobs that are paid that you don't really love, just so that you have the money coming in for a while. In the end, I just wasn't suited to. I mean, it's kind of bizarre now thinking that I even thought that industry was going to be any good for me.
But it's interesting, isn't it, Elaine, when you have this vision, and it certainly would have met that creativity. You said it was fun while you were studying and learning, but then it actually doing the job was different, and that's often the case too. And we don't realise that until we're in those jobs. They kind of sound a bit sexy, and then it's just like, oh, actually the whole culture and things. I do a lot of corporate coaching, and that's one of the things that I find a lot of organisations that invest in their people and spend time achieving results, but doing it through the people. They have positive cultures, but a lot of the organisations I work in have very, very negative and toxic cultures. And it's just not pleasant. People get sick. They get physically sick. They get mentally sick, emotionally sick. And like you were saying, being really affected by, the emotions of others and the environment that you're working in. Is that when you started to not get well? Or what was the journey there about your health?
Yeah, definitely. I got a chronic cough that nobody could explain. I had lots of gut issues. I had a lot of anxiety, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that kind of, looking back, even in my 20s, I mean, young people in their 20s party a lot at university. Like none of that is none of that is very healthy behavior. And you don't sleep a lot, and you're like, But I had a lot of recurrent UDIs and thrush and anxiety and skin issues and stuff like that. And then by the time I was in the film industry, that constant anxiety just would give me diarrhea. And I remember one day, this was already here in Sydney, walking to work and kind of fantasizing about having an accident so I could have a break.
Yeah.
And that's when I woke up. I was like, oh my God, did I really just think that I should be injured so I can have a work break?
Yeah. What were you doing? Let me backtrack a bit. How did you get to Australia? So Germany, what was the transition here? I'm going to come back and pick that little bit up, but just what's that transition to Australia?
So one of my film contracts in Munich, when I was working in Munich, was finished, because you always work for a movie, right? And once the movie is wrapped up, you kind of got to find the next project. And I just kind of wanted to change. And I had a really good friend here from high school, actually. And she was living in Bondi. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to come and finally visit you, because once you're in the next movie, there's no more.
You can't have time. Yes. Yeah.
You're tight, locked in. So I was like, okay, let's have a break now. I'll come to Australia, and maybe I can even find a job very easily there, because I knew that for my professional development, it's always good if you work in international.
Yes, yeah.
Well, not just in German movies. And I came here, obviously loved it, stayed with my friend, and got a job really quickly at a Sydney production company. That's how I then found myself fantasizing about rather having an accident. And it was also kind of that feeling of, this is going to be my last try in that industry.
Okay, yeah.
If it maybe, it's going to be really different at the other end of the world.
And it wasn't.
It really wasn't. And after that morning where I had that crazy thought about having an injury, I actually went to a higher level in the company, and I addressed the bullying that was going on. In the meeting, they basically said to me that they know that person behaves the way that I described it, but because she delivers the results, it's
bullshit.
accepted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's accepted, and basically I have to toughen up if I want to stay in that industry, was kind of the bottom line of the chat. And that's when I thought to myself, no, I do not want to basically become like that person, and I don't want to toughen up, and I don't want to, start being mean to others, because that's kind of the accepted standard. And that's when I think my contract was ending a couple of weeks later. So I then made a decision not to extend the contract, even though they offered it. That's when I started sleeping on people's couches at the world, because I only had my suitcase full of clothes and not much else. And I was too ashamed to go back home and admit that I had completely failed. And I also was kind of obviously enamored with Australia and the beautiful sunshine and ocean here, and just thought maybe I can try and make it work for a bit longer.
Wow. Gosh, that makes me, I'm not even going to go there, but that whole cultural stuff and letting people get away with those bad behaviours, that just really makes me angry around that, because it's not okay. And there's so many people that still get away with that. But anyway, let's not go down that path. So you made that. So it sounds very much like values, what you value in life was not being met through your work. And was your health still suffering then? Or like, how did you transition into being a doctor, a different type of doctor?
Not really a doctor. I went into body work at the time, because I already thought I was really old at the age of, 28, something like that. I was like, I'm too old to study again. Now, in retrospective, I'm still studying.
Yes, I know. I'm going to talk to you about that. But yeah.
I should have just bitten the bullet and done the proper thing. But I mean, bodywork was amazing. I also met my husband, who is an osteopath, and we then obviously got together and made things work. And then also had children really quickly, actually, also. And it was more sort of then that really condensed sleep-deprived phase, the the breastfeeding, the not sleeping, where I had really chronic pain to the point where I couldn't stand up, couldn't sit up, couldn't walk. And that was kind of what created this downward spiral. So, and I know this is such a big issue, where such a big time in the life of where hormones change like crazy. They get no sleep. They don't have that village around them to really help raise those children. We don't get the German system to support you for childcare being affordable and all of that. So not to put the blame out there, but it's obviously a time in our life where a lot of women unfortunately get a diagnosis and they start feeling really unwell, because if you already have something, you're going into that time of your life not being ideal, then it can really be like too much for the body. And when the body goes, no, I'm just going to put a stop into that and make you basically listen to me, you have to start listening and take a break. And that's basically when everything went really bad.
Yeah, that I hear that so many times that, and it's happened with me as well, that it's almost like we get these little niggles, and we either try and push through it or we ignore it or a whole range of things. But then the universe is like, you really need to listen. So it'll throw something big at us that just makes us stop. And often that's some sort of something really severe. So that happened with you. That sounds really debilitating, that not being able to, just being in so much pain around that. So could you find answers to that or not?
Yeah, and I mean, it was also horrible because, I had these two tiny little beings to look after, and I really wanted to look after them as well, but it just became so impossible. And then you end up in an endless kind of hamster wheel of appointments, surgeons, psychologists, different doctors, injections into the spine, like all things, and you get more and more confused about what's happening to you. You try all of the different things. You're put on more and more drugs, and kind of nothing really helps. And you become more and more desperate to try and figure out what's going on with you, but nobody really coordinates it for you as well. So I just always remember that feeling of being so alone and having to understand between what the surgeon said and what the rheumatologist said, and then taking that information back to the GP, but nobody really looking at the big picture, and that you, in the state that you're in, that you have to be your own.
And you can't even do that, can you? You can't even do it because
well, that you can't even see through the weeds anymore. So that's definitely one of the things that I always, try to improve here in Australia as well, that we get more connected in the healthcare system as well, that, people communicate better with each other so that our care is more comprehensive. But I just got worse and worse and worse, basically to the point where, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called rheumatoid arthritis. I was put on all the drugs. And then weirdly, after a couple of months on the drugs, I still had zero improvement. Then went to more rheumatologists, and they then basically said, oh, hang on, maybe the diagnosis wasn't actually correct. So it's highly frustrating and confusing. And then, eventually, basically, the short of it is that I was on so many extremely strong drugs that I really went crazy. Sad to say, and I really hit a rock bottom, and that's when I basically went, okay, can't get any worse than this. I'm still in, all of this debilitating pain, despite all of this heavy drug cocktail, and the heavy drug cocktail feels horrible, and I hated taking the drug because I was always more on the natural medicine side of things. And I was so constipated from all of those codeine and the painkillers, and I basically could not poop. And I was like, oh my God, this is all very horrible. And basically, I just had to, I was like, okay, none of this is working. I'm just going to stop taking the drugs.
Ooh.
I'm not advising to people to do.
No, that's what I was going to, yes.
Please don't go ahead and do that, because that was actually really bad. And I should have definitely done that under guidance. But, so out of it. I was just like, I'm not going to take any of this anymore. This is bad. And I had horrible withdrawal symptoms, which also I never knew that you get so addicted to all of the drugs. It's really a another epidemic, all of these painkillers and stuff. And you feel so bad because I wasn't mentally addicted to them. I really hated taking them the entire time. So I was always like, what do you mean I'm addicted? I can't be addicted. I hate taking them. But my body...
Your body had become dependent.
I had a physical dependency. And the only way it expressed itself was that I had more pain when I didn't take them. So it was like I had to take more.
You have to take them. Yeah, I hear that a lot. It isn't it?
Way. And anyway, it took me a couple of weeks. And then actually I realized, the pain isn't all that bad anymore. So half of my problem was being on his medication, my body being in a constant sort of withdrawal and asking for more drugs. And none of these doctors had told me and warned me of that.
Or even monitoring kind of as well. Yeah.
They gave me a prescription for another 6 months and basically were like, do not come back. Here is your endless codeine. Here is your endless Lyrica, Tramadol, Endo, and whatever you want to have, go and don't.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you want to set up for somebody with a prescription medicine addiction, that's a good way to go. But and I obviously, I just weaned myself off, which felt horrible. But that made me realize how actually I was already a lot better without the drugs. Also,
without the drugs,
and I was able to poop again, and a couple of, my skin started clearing up. I had really horrible skin from, not being able to poop and being on all these medications. So and then I just had to, find other ways, get strong again. I tried so many different modalities, and obviously also started studying more into functional health, functional medicine, nutrition, natural medicine, all of those things. And that's really what makes me passionate into helping other women now that struggle with issues, that there is a lot of options. I'm not against conventional medicine at all. It helps us at a good point of time. We need it for crisis care. We obviously need it when we have a broken arm and all of those things, but it's not really fantastically set up for prevention care, and it's not set up for chronic health issues. And we really have a pandemic of chronic health issues now. And that's where we get very little help, and I hear that very frequently from other women, that they get very little help with more chronic issues. And so I want to open up the communication with doctors and healthcare providers, because I feel like we can really work so well together. And I'm not against medication. Medication can also, I really want women who have a thyroid issue to be on their thyroid medication, but then still work on the underlying issues, so they're also supported more holistically from all sides. So I rather want, the best healthcare system where we can all work together and get the best outcome for the patient, rather than working against each other.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's really in alignment with where I'm on health and wellness. Is I think that there is a place for, the mainstream medicine and medications, but not to be reliant on them. And the thing that you said there too, it reminded me of my school days. I studied agriculture at school. I grew up in a country town and was never going to do anything to do with agriculture, but that was one of the subjects that I studied. And the teacher always talked about prevention is better than cure. And, what can you do to prevent disease in the agricultural industry, but also thinking about that in my own life as well. What can I do to prevent being unwell and unhealthy and things like that? So that really fits in with where I'm at. And I think that is probably when you were talking about as a kid being a doctor, but being a different type of doctor. It's about being in that health and wellness industry, but having that view where you're working together, not against each other. It's that complementary medicine. I remember I was seeing my GP for like regular checkups, and she was away, so I ended up seeing a different doctor, and the different doctor was very, very anti anything that wasn't within her remit of, that sort of mainstream medicine. And I felt very disempowered seeing that doctor. I would never, ever see her again. She was very disempowering around women's health. And it was just like, I need to take control of my own health, and you're part of my health team. But that's not how she saw it. She saw it as I needed to do what she said. And if I chose not to, then I was wrong. And it was kind of like, well, you're not really the health. And it was an interesting, that was an interesting visit. But anyway, going off tack. So what do you do now? What do you actually do in your business then, Aline?
Yeah, so as a functional nutrition practitioner, I basically, take a really thorough history with the ladies, where we spend a lot of time going all the way back to your birth,
Yes.
where a lot of things can get started. And then we run some lab testing. So I really work with blood chemistry, obviously some gut testing and hormone testing. And then we, wait for those tests to come back, and we really tailor a nutrition, lifestyle, and supplement plan. And I always give people the option. Yes, you can also take an antibiotic for this, but there's also different options. So it's for you what they want to choose to do. And even if they want to take an antibiotic for something, I will completely support them with that, because there's also still very great natural solutions, like probiotics and things that we can do alongside the antibiotics to really make sure that, the gut health is not completely destroyed. Yeah. And their body accepts the antibiotics better as well. So it's not a no yay or nay kind of situation. Yeah. It's just really about giving women options and helping them to feel empowered in their choices and feel positive about the choices, and really tailoring the diet, the lifestyle, and the supplements to them, and really discovering those hidden causes that are causing all of their symptoms.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing about what are the hidden causes, because sometimes the symptoms can kind of mask themselves, and it's getting to that, what is the hidden cause underneath it all, and addressing that, not just the kind of that superficial symptom around things.
Yeah, we only see the tip of the iceberg, right? Look like migraines, fatigue. It might look like, weight gain that's frustrating. Might just look like really heavy periods or painful periods, acne, eczema, all of the different skin issues, constipation, bloating, you name it, and it seems really unrelated, but usually the bottom of the iceberg, the biggest part, is really hidden underwater, and that's where we have to dig in and kind of discover with lab testing and a really comprehensive history how it's all connected, and then restore, remove some of the stresses. Like when we're talking about stress, it's not just mental, emotional stress, which is obviously a big part for women juggling careers and children and, marriages and all of those things. So for sure, your nervous system and your stress plays a big part. But other stress is, blood sugar imbalances. Do you eat like too many carbs and sugar? It can be toxins from the environment. It can obviously be something like a virus coming in. It can be, having different gut issues. Like all of that is stress to your body. And we just try to remove some of that stress and trust that your body can have that innate intelligence to then restore and get back into balance.
Yeah, yeah. You know, when they talk about the gut being the second brain, do you talk about that or not? Like I've
Yeah.
heard, yeah, what is that? What's that mean? That your gut is your second brain?
Well, the gut has a lot of neurons,
Yeah.
many more neurons that most people are aware of. So it's got its own intelligence. It's also about houses 70 to 80% of your immune system. Also, a really big amount of your lymphatic system. So it's really the second hub in your body
Yeah.
that communicates with the whole rest of your body. And so that's why I love working with it. I also really believe in this beautiful microbiome that we still don't know that much about, actually, and is still being discovered so much more, which is an exciting field of research. But these microbes that live on us and inside us that really communicate and shape our health, that's our connection to our Mother Earth and the microbes in our soil. So I always feel like the healthier our soil and our earth is, the healthier we are, and it creates this beautiful reconnection to us being part of our nature and environment, and not seeing us as separately. So again, it's a beautiful
I
holistic
love
view.
that. Yeah, I love that holistic
Yeah.
view. I love the holistic view. What are some quick tips for listeners to, I guess, look after and there's been a lot that you've mentioned already, but maybe some things that people can do to either look after their gut more, just preventative things, or just general health and wellness? And I know that that's a very long, like there's so many things, but just maybe a couple of quick tips that they could take on.
So a lot of the things are much more simple than we want to hear.
Yeah.
We often skip the simple things and want to go straight to what's the hottest new
Yeah,
supplement
sure.
trend. The supplement industry is obviously massive, and they always want to sell you something. But I always go back to us again being part of our natural environment. So you spending more time outdoors, you automatically improve your gut health because it's that outdoor microbiome. You having a pet, not over sterilizing your kitchen or your environment. You also, if you're spending time outdoors, you're going to have more sun exposure, more natural light exposure, which regulates your circadian rhythm. And we know that if your circadian rhythm is out of whack because we spend too much time on screens and late at night, we're still exposed to all of this artificial light. We know that the gut microbiome is impacted, and every single cell in your body gets dysregulated because it has a circadian clock. So with the simple fact of waking up with the sun, getting early morning sun exposure, going outside, preferably walking barefoot or really interacting with your environment, maybe having a swim and getting that ocean microbiome up your sinuses, you already really changed your microbiome. And the other one is obviously stress reduction, because we know that constant rushing state is not going to help you digest your food. It's going to shut down your digestive juices, and in the long term, we know it's linked to worse health outcomes. So having a meditation practice, even if it's just a minute or two of breathing meditation or something like that, that you can implement even when your kids are little, or you're having to manage several human beings in your household, is always possible and doable. So I always like to give tips that are not too big of an offer.
Yes.
So if I tell people to meditate for half an hour, they probably won't do it.
No. I find the same too when I'm talking with people. It needs to fit in with their lifestyle, and it needs to be kind of steps for them to be able to take. And quite often I was going to say simpler, but maybe it's not simpler for people, but they are simple kind of practices, sometimes people just want the big, new, shiny, whatever. But if we get back to basics, it's almost like when you were talking at the beginning about that lifestyle of living with your parents and your grandparents in rural Germany, that's it's a nice simplistic lifestyle, but more of that wholesome lifestyle. Before we end, what has the pandemic, COVID, where everybody's sterilizing everything, you know how you were talking about, not over sterilizing, what impacts that have where everybody's using hand sanitizer a million times a day?
That would be a very interesting study to conduct. And I don't think anyone did any studies on that because they don't want to point their fingers at it. But also, there were obviously lots of other studies to be done into the virus and the vaccine, stuff like that. But from what we know, a lot of these products contain extra phthalates and toxins that really harm our hormones and our microbiome. We know that from plenty of other studies. So I would say the effects have probably been quite devastating. And I really tried not to do that COVID as much as I could. And also, we know that the mental health effects and all of that, it was a terrible time. We do know it's affected us, and it's affected us for generations. I think the sterilizing and over managing the hygiene is one of the aspects that contributes to that long-term health effect. But I don't think I've seen any studies on it. But it would have been a very interesting.
It'd be interesting, and there's so many other things, like we won't even go there. But I know when my kids.
If we talk about it more, because we had to do it, we had to do it. So.
Yeah, that's right. I just know with that sterilizing with my kids growing up, sure, we had hygiene, but they would be out in the mud. They would be, playing. I remember my daughter sitting in the dog food bowl, with the dogs licking her and feeding the dogs their food. And I know my other people in my immediate surrounds are a little bit horrified, and they were over sterilizing and stuff. But anyway, it's
that isolation that we all experienced in being isolated from human beings, which is against our nature. But also every time you hug somebody, you share their microbiome, and we didn't have any of that. So it's
be interesting. That'll be interesting. Where can our listeners find you? Where can they find you?
Excuse me. You can find me on Instagram at The Wellness Witches, and my website is called thewellnesswitches.com.au. And I obviously also hang out on LinkedIn, just my name, Aline McCarthy.
Yeah, and all the details will be in the show notes for people there. Gosh, and one other question I did want to ask, Aline, can people see you online, or is it in-person practice?
Definitely. I see people online all across the world. So that's one of the good things that COVID has brought us with its up this amazing online world. And obviously we can just do a virtual consult. I can order the gut testing and hormone testing in 25 different countries. It gets shipped to your house. You just scoop some poop and send it back to the lab. So it's all super convenient. You don't even have to leave the house for any of it.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate that. And listeners can definitely find you in the details in the show notes. So thanks so much for that for your time today. Thanks. And if anybody just Boston, my dog, is just decided that he's I think the postman might be here. So that's probably a good time to leave. I was just going to say, if anybody would like to join the Happiness Hive newsletter, jump over to my website, so happiness-hive.com. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and you can sign up to the newsletter, and I have lots of tips and things there as well. So thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.